When you add the Gmaps plugin component onto your canvas, you're provided with a tremendous volume of power and flexibility for how you introduce maps to your end users. What we'll focus on in this video is how to use all of the basic properties so that you can configure a basic map experience. When opening the property sheet, you're immediately provided with a series pane. This series is a layer that can be configured against any data source, whether it be a query from Queries a Web Service, a BI query, even other third-party solutions from Intivia can be configured against a series. The first thing when creating a new series is that you name it. So we'll call this points. And now we need to define if this is going to be actual points on a map or shapes or polygons. In this case, we'll start with points on a map. The address lat long property can be bound to any geographic coordinate, whether it be a city, a country, a zip code, latitude, longitude, an address, even a continent. When I click OK, you'll notice that the map doesn't instantly plot those points. What you'll need to do is go into the property sheet and click refresh, and now the map will dynamically load those locations. The next property that we're going to bind is our labels, and the labels are what we'll see in the map when you click on a single location or on a polygon. A label can be as simple as a text value in a cell. It could be a dynamically concatenated value, or even custom HTML. We'll cover custom HTML in another video. The important thing is that when we select our labels, we'll need the same number of cells in our range as the addresses or latitude, longitude. And what Gmaps plugin will do is it will match them up based on the order of the cells. So when I click OK, now we've associated our labels. The next thing that we want to do is associate numeric values with these points. These are going to be sales or inventory or any other measure that you want to assign to each individual point. So I have some data here that we're going to bind, once again, with a one-to-one relationship between our points and our values. And I click OK. And now when we preview the map, we'll be able to instantly see the labels that we've defined, some of them being HTML, some of them not. If we go to Australia, we should be able to see some custom HTML where we have an icon here and even a custom URL that we could use to launch a website or a report. The next thing that we want to configure is our selector behavior. This will allow us to interact with other Excelsius functionality as I select locations. The selector insertion types should look familiar to you because they're the exact same insertion types supported with Excelsius. We support position, label, value, and even row. I'm going to select label, and I'm going to select a destination on this tab here on our features tab. So I'm going to select one single value for now, and in a moment I'll show you how we expand this with multi-selection. So now when we re-preview this, as I select any one of the icons, it's going to insert the associated label. Now because we're using HTML labels, it will actually insert the full HTML. So that's where something like perhaps insertion of rows or maybe even position would come into play. But for now we'll leave it as labels. The next feature I wanted to show you is enable multi-selection. So unlike other Excelsius components, Gmaps plugin supports the ability to select multiple locations on the map and then insert into those locations. So when I enable multi-selection, what we'll also need to do is expand the destination to match the same size as the source. So in other words, because I have up to 10 or up to, it looks like 5 or 6 labels, I'll want the destination to also have 5 or 6 cells. So now when I re-preview this, what we'll notice is as I select locations, we'll not only see multiple info windows, but we'll also see the map insert into the destination. The other thing that will happen is each one of these icons will work as a toggle instead of a push button, allowing you to dynamically add or remove locations. The other feature that we have underneath the checkbox is a bindable property that allows you to toggle multi-selection. So if I bind this to a cell, the default is going to be 0. With multi-selection, this toggle will simply turn on or off this ability to multi-select points. And what we've done is we've bound a toggle button to this same cell, which will allow me to turn this feature on or off during runtime. So now as I select multiple points, one location, it will work as I expect, and when I turn multi-select on, I now have the ability to select multiple points and toggle them on or off. If I was to have multi-select turned on and I was to toggle that off, the single selection would not take effect until I click on my next point. The last feature that we'll talk about on the General tab is our series destination. When we bind the series name destination, it will eventually capture the series that we're looking at. Now at this point we only have one single series, so what I want to do is add a second series. We'll call this heat maps, and I'll briefly show you how we can change the orientation of these icons and our second series. Now before we do that, we want to actually bind some locations. In this case, instead of looking at addresses, countries, or zips, I'm going to bind this series to a list of latitude and longitude points. Now the benefit of using geocoded data is that CMaps plugin can automatically render this data without having to rely on geocoding. And geocoding is nothing more than converting your regions, your addresses, to latitude and longitude. So performance is going to be significantly better when you're using latitude and longitude. Now, when we go to the Appearance tab and we scroll down, we have a way to modify either one of these series and its visual attributes. So if we go to points, I can very quickly and easily change our pins to plus signs, for instance, so that when I click refresh, now my original locations are plus signs. I can also change the color, so if we want this deep red color, and we can even bind this color if we wanted to, so that I could dynamically change the color for each individual point during runtime. Similarly, I can also change the transparency and make locations more or less transparent on the screen, depending on what kind of user experience I'm wanting to build. If we select our second series, heat maps, what I want to do is convert these pins into density maps. So if I go to Style and I go to Heat Map, you'll see that the properties quickly change, allowing me to toggle different heat map styles. Now if we go and refresh this, what we'll get is a density map which will change the color of the locations as they overlap on top of each other, thus making them more or less dense. We also have the ability to actually change the size of these density maps so that we can get a more accurate representation of our data based on what zoom level you're focused at. So if I go ahead and preview this, we're going to notice a few things. One is that when we select one of our locations, we now get the series insertion. However, if I select one of my heat maps, it's going to change and indicate that we're now looking at a heat map series. The other thing that you notice is as we zoom into our heat maps, you can see that the points become less dense. Thus you see them break apart until we get to the lowest level, where you can select an individual location. Another thing that you notice is that as I select my heat maps, you do not see my data insertion change. That's because every single series in GMaps plugin has its own unique insertion. So while points is configured to insert into this range right here, we need to define where we're going to insert our heat maps. Now, one common mistake that we see a lot of is that when dashboard developers are building a dashboard, you'll try to set the insertion for the same range as a separate series. Similar to other components like charts, a single component in Excelsius like GMaps plugin is not allowed to insert into the same destination as another series. So what we actually have to do is insert our heat map into its own unique destination, and now we can use the selections for heat maps versus data points. There's other techniques that we explain in other videos that allow you to potentially capture the latest selection that you've made. Now we're going to go to the Behavior tab and take a look at some of the other features that we have available to you. In the Behavior tab, we have the ability to dynamically zoom, where GMaps plugin will look at all of the points plotted on the map and dynamically reorient itself to fit everything in one view. As a dashboard developer, we have the ability to turn this off and actually bind the zoom level to a cell. So for instance, I could bind to zoom level 5, which would instantly zoom the map in. And then the pan to location works the same way, where if I was to bind this to a cell, I can use any value to indicate where we want to focus the map. So I'm going to zoom out a little bit. And for instance, if I wanted to center the map on Thailand, for example, GMaps plugin will automatically center the map on wherever your pan to location property is bound. And once again, this could be anything, including an address, a zip code, a latitude, longitude point, or anything in between. So this grants you with a tremendous level of control over the map. The pan to location is a input only property, meaning that as you pan or move the map, it will not change this property. However, the zoom level is a bidirectional property, meaning as your end user clicks and zooms in with the map, it will actually change this property, or it works the other way where you can dynamically change this using components. And there's some very interesting capabilities where you can turn things on or off or use logic to dictate the pan and zoom. The next feature that we're going to focus on is SelectedItem. So in a dashboard, you may want to dynamically select a location on the map and have the info window appear. That's what SelectedItem does. Now this property is a little bit more advanced than other properties in that you have to dynamically concatenate two values together in order to pass a valid selected item. So if we go and scroll down, you can see that I've set this up. The way that SelectedItem works is that you need to take a series index, meaning the order of the series, and the point index, and concatenate them together so they're comma separated. So I'm going to bind this very quickly, and if we were to look at series and point index, we can look at how this is formulated. So for instance, when we look at series index, this is series number 1 and this is series number 2. So based on me pushing the value 1 or 2 into this cell, it will control whether we select points or heat maps. Now once we've indicated which series we're focused on, now we need to tell the map which location to select. Now this index is simply based on the order of your data. So if we were to look at the data, Miami would be number 1, Shanghai would be number 2, and this zip code would be number 3. So if we feed in a value here, let's say for number 3, what we do is we concatenate these together with a comma, and now GMaps plugin knows exactly how to select this item. When we check this box, it will actually show the info window as this property changes. So we have a great way to dynamically select and show labels within the map without me actually having to click in the map. It will also dynamically change the location. Let's zoom out so we can actually see this in action. You can see as I select and change this, it's changing the selected item. Or if we go to my heat map, as I click through, it's dynamically selecting the location on the map. So this is a very powerful feature for creating this seamless user experience between the map and the rest of the dashboard. The next feature that we'll focus on is series visibility, which allows you to not hide the map, but rather hide each individual series in the map. This works exactly like regular Excelsius dynamic visibility, where we have a key and we have a status. So if we scroll up, what we can do is we can bind the status for our heat maps to this cell here. And as I do that, you can see that my heat maps disappear immediately. When I bind the key, which is the value number 1, whenever this cell or our status equals 1, our heat maps will appear, and we can actually toggle that while in development mode to make sure that we've got it set up correctly. So now you can use any other Excelsius components like this component right here for hiding and showing heat maps to dynamically control that during runtime. So as you can imagine, introducing multiple layers of data to your end users is a powerful way to navigate multiple geographic grains, multiple geographic levels, or even different data sets. Now, with a good understanding of how to place locations on a map and control their attributes, I wanted to cover adding polygons, and that's accomplished using our shape data feature. So I'm going to add a third series, select shape data, and you can see that I'm provided with a shape data options pane. All you do is click on this icon, and now we have multiple shape data options available to us. We can use an external CSV file to load shape data. I can use a very popular feature, shape file URL, or we can even use data from our spreadsheet to dynamically draw shapes in the map. In this particular example, we're going to use an Esri shapefile to draw the US by states. So what we do is select a shapefile URL, which is going to be a shapefile that's loaded onto our server. So here we have this shapefile that's loaded on the Senegon Solutions server. I select OK, and instantly that shapefile will be loaded and presented in the map. Now we can't see it right now because we need to pan the map over to the United States. So from what we've learned before, I'm going to change my pan to location to USA, which will instantly center the map over the US. I can hit refresh and now see that shape data plotted on the map. Now it's kind of hard to see exactly what state is what, so if we go to Appearance and we go to Series 3, which is my shapefile, you can see that I have a variety of options available to me. I can enable Use Outline, which now makes it much easier to actually see each individual state. I can change the color, and I can even change the transparency. Generally, we try to keep the transparency around 60 to 70% so that we can see the map behind it but still make out the actual polygons. Now that we have our shapefile drawn, we can set up the labels the exact same way. I can go and I can bind my labels, and I can bind values for each one of these individual states. So now when I go and I click on California, I'll see the corresponding data associated with California. And similar to creating data insertion with our data points, it works the exact same way with a polygon or a shapefile. Now I want to apply some alerts to this shapefile. I can go to the Alerts tab, select the series that I want, in this case Series 3, which is my polygon, enable alerts, and now I have some advanced alert options. We borrow the same concepts from Excelsius to create alerts, but have taken it a few steps further to make it more configurable. I want to use alerts by % of target, which will now allow me to bind specific targets for each individual state. So when I select my targets and click OK, now the map will reflect my targets. I can select the number of alert levels. Typically, most customers use 2 to 3. So if I'm above target or below target, I want to be able to instantly see a representation of which states are performing well and which are not performing so well. So if we change orange to green, I can indicate if high values are good or if high values are bad. And we can even bind this in case if we want to dynamically change it if a measures dynamically change it. We also have the ability to dynamically bind the colors in case we want to change the ordering of the colors, or even bind the limits themselves in case we want to dynamically change the limits during runtime. Now, one interesting thing about alerts and individual points is that you also have the ability not only to bind colors, but if you expand the property sheet here a little bit, you can see that you can dynamically bind the icon style. So as alerts go up or down, you can change the color and or you can change the actual icon style during runtime. Finally, to refine the appearance of our dashboard, we have the ability to turn certain aspects on or off. We can choose to show or hide values, series names, or even the info windows themselves in case you don't want to show info windows. We also have the ability to turn certain shadow or visual effects on or off. Maybe we want to make my info windows a darker color and a lighter text. We certainly have the ability to do that. We also have a way to turn on or off multiple map assets. Things like the scroll track, the navigation, the map style selector, and even a new selector panel that we have where you can turn features on or off. If we preview this, the selector panel will allow us to do several interesting things, including clustering markers, enabling multi-selection where we can actually use distance to select locations on the map, or even if we're using something like heat maps, we can even manually with our mouse draw locations and dynamically select those locations with multi-selection. Finally, we have a way to define a specific distance and within the map be able to click and select anything within that range.